Hello, Rajesh. Good afternoon. How are you?
Hi, ma'am. Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, and good. So audio is okay, right? Normally
Yeah.
that's the standard problem. Yeah, and let me also try and
Share your
share
screen
my
and try. Yeah.
slide. Yeah. We use Google Meet, so sometimes when you are in a different platform, it gets a bit confusing. See.
Do you have audio on your PPT?
No.
Okay. No.
No. So it just slides. Um, is it coming up okay?
Yes, I can see it loud, clear.
Rajesh, good afternoon.
Sir, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
Yeah, very good. How are you?
Very good. Very good.
You're at Kochi or started traveling?
Yeah, I'm at Kochi. Yes, I'm at. I've been fairly. I think this last maybe 10 months has probably been very less travel. I guess for all of us.
Okay, right.
But,
Yeah. Got used to it, not traveling.
I'm sorry.
Got used to not traveling.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in a way, I think before that, running for a flight at 4 a.m. was kind of normal. Now, okay, now you need to get back to that routine is not going to be fun anymore, right? But I think the good thing is, a lot of. I mean, one thing that we are finding is a lot. Of course, out of necessity, a lot of our customers and everybody is now used to this mode of working. So at least to an extent, if this continue, I mean, personally, I don't know if it is good or bad. I mean, I still like connecting with people, right? I mean, something like, for example, this event would have been, it would have been really good to have been there and met people and, just gotten that energy and all of that. So I'm definitely missing that. On the other side, on the personal side, it is certainly an improvement. But yeah.
Rajesh is also there on that. Thank you. Hi, Rajesh.
Hello, hi, how are you? Hi, Sunil.
Good.
Hi, Rajesh. Good
Hello,
afternoon.
hi, one Rajesh to other.
Yeah.
Wonderful to
Yeah.
meet you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Looking
How,
forward to
how are
that.
the boot camp sessions going?
Oh, this is today, yesterday, last 2 days were on design and making things. So they finished 2 products each day, one which includes mechanical, electrical, coding, everything involved. Again, they had
Got
made
it.
movies on all those kind of things. And today was about future thinking, so that is just finished the session on that. They had to think about what would happen in future for first order, second order action, reaction, and so that's what they're going to identify problems for the future. Then work on design thinking to solve some of those things and such. So that's a whole
Actually,
exercise.
very nice. I was just, I think one of the things I was thinking about when I was preparing for this was the fact that when we all, I mean, I went to IIT Madras in '95, so there was no ecosystem at that point in time. Of course, it's not about ecosystem. I mean, I think I was also not thinking about anything along the
Yeah,
lines, but then
yeah.
the ecosystem has developed quite a lot. So I think it must be really, and I'm sure you're enjoying it as well with the energy of
Yeah.
this time is where they have the most energy, right? So it's really nice.
Right, and ecosystem is something that you can create, and I truly believe institutions that create ecosystems, actively create ecosystems, will be far ahead than institutions that do not.
Absolutely.
So, I talk about this at MIT. They create about 500 companies a year. Okay, 250 or so officially created. Other 250 kids start in their hostel room, like Dropbox and companies like that.
Right. Or Stanford
All
for that matter, right?
Yeah, all Stanford, all of them. It's just
Yeah.
ecosystem. It's the ecosystem that is making it happen. Not that kids are not any different in any of
Oh,
these
absolutely.
places.
No. But
So
I was thinking in last maybe 10, 15, 20 years, I think there's definitely been um, a lot of opportunities and I mean, a lot more ecosystem than what was there at some point in time. Even to a large extent, even thought processes have changed, right? I mean, culturally and uh, socially, I think when I got out, nobody startup was not a thing, right? And it is not really an option that one would consider.
Correct.
Very different times. But I mean, on the other side, it's really exciting to see see these initiatives happening. And I was thinking, IIT Palakkad, for example, is a relatively young institution, but I think the way we are able to do all of this is pretty amazing. I think that's really what will kickstart these, the ecosystem and the thought process. So.
Right. And if we invest in that end, in creating ecosystem, the downstream returns would be so much. Okay.
Absolutely.
And that can be done, and that is my work. That has been my thesis and my research for the last so many years in creating.
Where are you based?
I'm right now in Kuala Lumpur.
Kuala Lumpur. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that your base, or I mean, you?
I'm just leaving Kuala Lumpur back to US. So I was teaching here for last 6 years at a new business school that MIT Sloan started in here. So I was teaching innovation and entrepreneurship.
Got it.
Now I'm returning back to New Hampshire. So
nice.
And what about you? Where are you now?
So my base is now Kochi.
Okay.
So I was in the US, moved back in 2010 to set up this firm, and then 2014, after we raised a round of venture funding, I moved back there. 2018 I came back. So the plan is to be based here and operate out of here. There's also kind of, I would say, sort of a story of the smaller towns coming up, smaller cities coming up and all that. So, it's good here because there's a lot of access in terms of being able to travel if required. Of course, not right now, but in general, right? And then a lot of very good talent. And Kochi has also been very interesting city in the sense that, there was this whole concept called Startup Village, which was started by on a PPP basis. And I think while there's still some way to go for maturity, there are some good number of companies that have come out of here.
Right. I was involved in bringing the Fab Lab to Kochi. And
okay. The Maker Village, is it? Okay, nice.
From MIT, I was doing the negotiation from that side.
Got it. Excellent.
Yeah.
Small world.
I don't know what time it is.
2 more minutes.
Oh, okay. So, okay, good. I didn't know I was cutting into presentation time. We were just chatting and.
No, I'm keeping a track on time.
Okay.
And probably so is Dr. Arvind.
And ma'am, the talk is for 30 minutes, 25 minutes, right? 25
to 30 minutes and 10-minute Q&A.
Got it.
I mean, if there is interest, we can allow the Q&A to spill over a bit, but into lunch, not an issue.
I look forward to the presentation. Great.
Okay. So welcome everybody to the third day of the INNODEATE Bootcamp, and we have with us Mr. Rajesh P. and Dr. Arvind. Request you to introduce him.
Thank you, Anuradha ma'am, and welcome Mr. Rajesh. Welcome all the other participants again to the third day of the INNODEATE Bootcamp. It's my pleasure to introduce the speaker for today. Rajesh Padinajara Madam is an entrepreneur and investor. Rajesh co-founded Rapid Value, a a leading digital technology services and solutions firm, bootstrapping first and later raising venture funding from Helion Ventures to build a 500 plus global firm. And from what I understand, prior to this session, the firm is based out of Kochi.
Yeah.
Prior to founding Rapid Value, Rajesh worked with Deloitte Consulting in the US and helped large enterprises adopt technology. Rajesh is an expert on digital strategy and transformation for large enterprise and has guided a number of Fortune 500 firms through significant technology transformations with a focus on business value. Rajesh is an alumnus of IIT Madras and IIM Calcutta. Thank you very much, Mr. Rajesh, for accepting our invitation. And it's our privilege and pleasure to have you be part of this bootcamp. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arvind. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Arvind, for the introduction, and thank you, Anuradha ma'am, for this opportunity to talk here, and also to IIT Palakkad Innovation Foundation.
Thank you. The pleasure is ours.
I'm sorry.
Pleasure is ours.
It is. I mean, I think this is definitely an honor, and it is also quite exciting for me to be here. And I was, as I was discussing a few minutes back, I went to IIT Madras in 1995. At that point in time, first of all, I was not thinking about being an entrepreneur. At the same time, there were also not too many ecosystems around. I think the time was very, very different to encourage entrepreneurship. So it is really, really, exciting and heartening to see the kind of effort that is going into creating these ecosystems to, really sort of help students motivate in the direction of starting up and creating something. So that's really, really exciting. So again, thank you for this opportunity. Just a quick introduction about myself. Arvind sort of covered it, but I did my engineering from IIT Madras, then worked with IIM Calcutta and MBA at IIM Calcutta, then worked in Europe and US for a few years, and then around 2008 2009. I found that there's a huge set of technologies that is sort of transforming the way enterprises and really sort of people are operating. And at that point, it was not called digital transformation, but we were looking at these technologies and saying at that point primarily it was mobile and cloud, and we were sort of looking at those technologies and saying, okay, there's an opportunity here because some of these technologies are really going to change the way we operate, change the way we live. There is a significant opportunity here. So we founded this company called Rapid Value, wherein we essentially help large enterprises with their digital transformation roadmap or the direction in terms of how do they effectively use technology to create business value at a very high level, right? And today, the topic that I'm going to talk about is around digital transformation, which is sort of what is happening today. But I've tried to also take a slightly different view here in the sense that I'm trying to bring in, it's a little bit ambitious given the time frame, given that we have about 25-30 minutes. But what I'm trying to do is I'm also trying to compare and contrast what is happening today in terms of the digital transformation or the so-called fourth industrial revolution to some of the previous technology transformations that have happened in the last 200 years. So the whole idea is to see how impactful is it compared to some of these other ones. And of course, with an understanding that, we might not really be able to predict how impactful it is because we are in the middle of a transformation. So a lot of it is only post facto when you look back and say, okay, was it really transformative? Was it incremental? It's kind of very hard to say. But at the same time, I felt it would be a worthwhile initiative to sort of spend some time and look at it, right? The second reason I wanted to approach it this way is, we all talk about digital transformation and some of the things that are happening today. Now, as a student at IIT Madras, and I'm just talking for myself, when I was first year, second year, whatever, right? I was really excited about physics, math, engineering problems, solutions to engineering problems, all of that. But I never really, personally, I never really paid much attention to history. But as I eventually became an entrepreneur and went on the startup route, one of the things I realized is it is important to understand some of the history. I mean, not really from specific dates or such, but more from a pattern standpoint, because that kind of helps you also think through, what would the future look like. We'd be able to extrapolate some trends, and that would also help in one startup journey, right? So that's kind of the other part that I wanted to do here, because coming in from a pure engineering background, as I became an entrepreneur, I thought, the historical aspect has an importance, and that's the other thing I'm trying to do here. So, of course, we all talk about a lot of changes that are happening today in the ecosystem, and I want to share a few experiences that I went through myself, and a lot of us, depending on our phase of life, age, we might have gone through some of these. For some of you, some of these things might, some of the younger people, some of these things may not make sense, but I just wanted to just touch upon a few topics, few experiences from my own life, right? So in year 2000, when I was in my second year in MBA, everybody was talking about this one, freshman person who had joined in the campus. And the reason was that that person had a mobile phone. And of course, I think that's not a topic, that's not something that would make news today. So it was really amazing or amusing at that time that, everybody is talking about, this person is using a cell phone, and it's like a big deal. And where cell phones are today, right? Again, as a kid, I remember those days when, I would go buy a cassette, and I would try to get 6 songs into a cassette. So you got to pick and choose which songs are you going to get into those. It's a very different life from today, where I have my Spotify unlimited accounts, where I have access to a large number of songs, unlimited number of songs, literally, right? And the same thing has happened in the business world as well. Again, taking a few examples from my own life, one of my early 2000s in the US, one of our weekend traditions was we would go to the store called Blockbuster and pick out a couple of DVDs and watch those movies. And today, Blockbuster's history, Blockbuster versus Netflix, is a case study that has, Blockbuster only exists in case studies, right? All of that got disrupted by streaming media services like Netflix and so on and so forth. And very similar thing with taxis and Uber and so on and so forth. The point is that, we are going through an unprecedented pace of change. We are going through a time where there is a significant pace of change in technology. Every day something new comes out, and that changes the way we live, that changes the business models, that disrupts existing businesses. So significant amount of change, right? And I think all of us know this. Now I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about a particular situation. So in New York City, everybody is talking about significant pollution from vehicles, right? Everybody is talking about how do we address it? I mean, there's significant pollution from vehicle, there's significant hygiene issues. How do we address it? And I'm not talking about today, where of course there is pollution from internal combustion engines, and we are talking about moving to electric vehicles, right? We are at the cusp of probably at the cusp of moving to electric vehicles. But I'm talking about 1900s in New York City, right? So at that point in time, the biggest problem that everybody was talking about was horse carts. So London had 300,000 horse carts, and New York had 100,000 horse carts, and these horse carts are moving at 5 to 10 kilometers per hour, getting stuck in mud and all of that. And you had, horse dung and, dead horse bodies and all kind of significant hygiene issues with that. So it was like a big topic everywhere in terms of how do we address this in long term? How are we going to address all this horse manure and horse dung and all of these waste, right? Now, in less than 20 years, all of this got swept away by the hand of market, free market, right? So what happened clearly is in 20 years, the automobile or the internal combustion engine came up, Ford T, the T model came in. And I think, the last horse cart got retired somewhere around 1980. So in a very short time, in history, I mean, if you look at it in 20 years, the whole problem went away and the whole thing got literally transformed. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that transformations are not new. While we're going through a significant transformation now, transformations are not new, right? So, and hence it is important to, it becomes all the more important to look at how does the current transformation compare to some of the previous ones, and that's kind of what I'm trying to broadly attempt here, right? And in order to do that, I kind of put together a brief overview of sort of large technology transformations in last, say, 200 years, right? Again, the emphasis is not on dates or exact years, because some of these years are very fluid based on how you look at it, right? But the whole idea is to look at some of the trends and see what has happened in the past and how would that impact the future. And again, I also have to say, in order to simplify, there is going to be some generalizations made and such. So the whole idea is to kind of look at trends, right? So if you look at past, before 1750, probably there wasn't, I think life was very, very, very much same for majority of people. GDP or productivity increases were non-existent. Things were fairly slow, from an economic activity standpoint, or fairly stagnant or relatively same pace from an economic activity standpoint. So from 1770s to 1870s, when the first industrial revolution happened. And during this phase, steam engine came up, mechanization of loom, steel replaced, or wood got replaced by steel. So a lot of those things happened. So the initial sort of replacement of factory labor from human labor to mechanized labor, right? Now, however, if you look at the standard of living for common man, not much changed. People were living in houses that were not connected. And when I say not connected, not in today's parlance of connected IoT kind of, not that connection. I'm talking about, basic freshwater sewage kind of connections, right? And that's a big difference. There was no electricity. Automobiles were not there, or the internal combustion engine automobiles were not there. It was all horse carts. Healthcare was in fairly rudimentary stage. Life expectancies were relatively very, very low. Communication in terms of, communication was very, very rudimentary, right? So it is a very, very different era of life, and it's almost unimaginable for most of us who live in current era, right? And then from 1870 to 1940, and again, I think I just want to also make one more disclaimer here. I think a lot of these timelines and what I'm talking about are sort of the timeline of the inventions and not necessarily diffusion. And by that, what I mean is that, and we're probably talking about the timeline from the current developed economies. And then maybe some of these inventions took longer to come to us, and it became, to become prevalent in other sort of countries. But this was kind of looking at the current industrialized nations, right? So if you look at the second industrial revolution from 1870s to 1940, 50, whatever the time frame is, a lot of things changed significantly. So primarily it was around mass production, assembly line manufacturing, so on and so forth. But a lot of things that are taken today for granted as part of your regular life, not even comfort. I mean, these are all things that are today taken for granted as basic way of life. All of those things came up in that particular time frame. So homes got connected with sewage and freshwater lines, and that's a very, very important thing, because that actually brought down a lot of and that is a big impact on healthcare as well, because that brought down that brought down waterborne diseases, increased life expectancy, made life a lot more comfortable. I mean, if you really imagine, before that, if you had to take bath, you had to go out, pull water, heat it up, and then also dispose waste, right? So even human waste had to be disposed of. So it's a very, very different lifestyle, and it's a very, very there's a significant difference with some of these inventions coming in. So electricity and lighting, again, a big difference. once lighting came in, there was a safety aspect apart, instead of using gas lights and or gas lamps and such. And secondly, there was also a huge amount of productivity, because now a lot of things could be done regardless of the time of the day. Automobiles, significant productivity increase from a typical day-to-day lifestyle standpoint. Until then, people had to live very close to their workplace, pretty much walk to the workplace, come back from there. So there's no other option. There was no entertainment, nothing. Now suddenly, with automobiles coming up, there's opportunities have increased. People can stay a little bit away, a little bit more comfortable lifestyle, ability to go for shopping, things like that. A lot of those things came in. Healthcare improvements, penicillin came in, modern germ theory came up. So a lot of these things came up and came really together during that time frame, 1870s to 1940, 1950 kind of time frame, which is sort of the second industrial revolution. Now, the third industrial revolution, as we call it today, was primarily where computers came in. While it was a significant improvement from a productivity standpoint, it was a significant improvement from a enterprise productivity standpoint. A lot of it was limited to one dimension, and a lot of it was really around increasing productivity of, let's say, manufacturing, increased better productivity within enterprises and things like that. And the impact of that on basic human lives was relatively low. Again, that's what I'm saying. These are a little bit of approximations, right? But compared to all the innovations that came up in the second industrial revolution, the third industrial revolution did not change human life that much. And the fourth one I'll talk about a little bit, and that's kind of what we're going through right now, right? Now, just to kind of summarize the whole point in a little bit, dramatic way, is that if somebody was living in 1900, you were using a horse cart or a horse buggy to travel at 5 to 10 kilometers per hour, and in the same lifetime, that person could have been traveling in a Boeing at 600 kilometers per hour by 1960. And then, of course, in 1970s and 80s, there were all these sci-fi movies around flying cars in 2000. Year 2000 was always with flying cars. But, well, I mean, I think now we're probably getting there. But, I think it's definitely the pace of change in some of these fundamental technologies have not been at the same pace is kind of the point that I'm trying to make. And then I'll talk about some of the fundamental innovations that's happening now. So now with that, I'll come. Now, with that context, I'll talk a little bit about what is currently called digital transformation, or the fourth industrial revolution. Now, of course, I'm going to take a few examples, because a lot of this is, as I said, it is still evolving, right? We are going through this, this particular phase of transformation. So it is, it's going to be extremely difficult to say what is going to be the impact of this. However, you can always look at some of the facts and extrapolate and come up with some hypothesis, right? So now, I want to again, to talk about the time when we founded our firm in 2007, 2008 timeframe, wherein one thing that we were finding was, we had all worked with large enterprises, even until at that point in time. And what we found was a lot of these enterprises had systems that were more sort of what is called systems of records. And what I mean is these are all internal systems, but they're not really talking to their customers. They're not really talking to their employees. So it is all very, very inside their box kind of systems. And with some of the technologies that came out at that point in time, it was primarily cloud and mobile. What was happening was enterprises were now getting an opportunity, or businesses were now getting an opportunity to reach out to, easily reach out and connect with their consumers on one side and employees on the other side, right? And this was purely enabled by a technology, some of the technologies that are there. And along the same lines, what has happened is a plethora of technologies in the last 10 years, a large set of technologies came out, which is now helping connect businesses, their consumers and devices in a very seamless way. And that is helping create what's called a physical digital kind of an experience, wherein lines between physical and digital worlds are blurring, right? And what that means is now, because everybody has a mobile phone, it's starting from there, because everybody has a mobile phone, there's a lot of context availability. People know, our businesses know where you are, and that is where you are, what's your behavior, which could be good and which could be bad, right? In terms of the privacy issues and so on and so forth. But then on the positive side, what that is doing is it is enabling us to enabling businesses to understand and create very, very context sensitive offerings. And all of the sharing economy that has happened in the last few years is all the result of that. And also, now there's a lot more context, a lot of it is personalized. So when I log into Spotify, I get songs that are tuned to my taste. When I go to Amazon, based on my past history, they're able to predict what I want. So there's a lot more relevance in a lot of these transactions. And last but not least, one of the key things that has happened is AI or ML. And what that is doing really is, in the last 30, 40 years, what has happened is, we used computers to automate what we already did. Whereas now we are at a point where we are able to make computers learn on their, we're able to make computers learn, and that is already starting to create some significant improvements, and it will continue to create great improvements, right? So, for example, if you look at financial sector, a lot of wealth management is now done by AI-driven systems. On the healthcare side, there's a whole lot of opportunities that are coming out, wherein in some cases, diagnosis can be done better by an AI-driven by AI, wherein a radiology, a radiologist is assisted by AI for better tumor detection and things like that, or even prediction of, let's say, heart failure or any significant diseases. Of course, some of these have to go through regulation. I think so. There is still the regulation part of it, and this is all maturing, and it will take some time to come in. But the point is that now, in last few years, with all of these technologies coming in, there is a significant improvement. There is a significant, or at least there are a lot of areas where it is actually starting or actually touching human lives in a significant way. Now, some of it could be trivial. And some of it could be looked upon as trivial, but really, like I said, since we're going through this transformation, what's really going to be impactful and how much of an impact is it going to create? It'll take some time to, or we can only see that in retrospect, but it's very clear that a lot of these things are actually now starting to impact our lives in a very, very important manner. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about some of the key technologies enabling this revolution. Again, there's a lot of them, but I just kind of touching upon a few of those. We spoke about, I would say it all started with cloud and mobile, wherein with cloud technologies, it's really democratizing software delivery, wherein somebody who is sitting at a corner of the world can now write and deliver software to any part of the world, which is pretty amazing. And that capability did not exist 10, 15 years back. Mobile has played a big part, because now, mobile is a device that's actually, giving access to location or all other context, and hence now we are able to, or businesses are able to offer very, very context, or very, very customized offerings, right? We spoke about AI, ML, data engineering, and if you were to really look at one thing that is the biggest impact in this whole transformation, that's definitely AI, ML side. Internet of Things, sensors, that's all the connected devices is definitely very, very important. Advanced robotics, simple thing, we were during lockdown, you're struggling to get housework done with a kid who needs help in schooling and all of that. So I got this vacuum robot. I had something 10 years back, and what is the one that I saw now is way better. I mean, it's actually able to do a lot of work on its own. 3D printing, 5G, and the list goes on and on, right? I'll just take a couple of minutes, since we're talking about digital transformation, to sort of categorize broadly. And the reason I want to do that is, digital transformation itself is a very loosely used term, and it means something it means different things to different people. So I want to at least try and categorize a few of those, and just so that there's a, just to give a sense of some of the key changes that are happening, and then sort of conclude. So on one side, there is, because of all of these context and because of all of this data, there is a creation of creation of new business models, or in some way disruption of existing businesses, right? So if you look at an Ola or Uber or an Oyo or an Airbnb, these are all examples of new business models using some of the data and the context that is available. Or if you look at something like a Netflix, or Netflix is again a similar example, or a Fitbit, where you're actually able to provide a lot of useful data to the consumer, and then you're also creating a continuous, a continuous service delivery in terms of giving information or activities, and giving very useful information. So that's something that's happening in a big way. So essentially creation of new business models. The second part is significant changes to existing businesses. Existing traditional businesses are going through significant changes, and I want to take a couple of examples. In fact, two of the Guardian is a large insurer out of New York. We're working with them, wherein and very similar is HDFC Life in India, again one of the largest insurers. And what these guys are really doing is they are cutting out the middlemen. They're going directly to the consumer. In a lot of cases, they're doing a lot of AI, or maybe not AI, but they're using a lot of ML to improve their underwriting. So they're doing a lot of digitization and being able to reach directly they are seeing the impact of being able to directly reach consumer. Metro Mile is another example of a different different business model, wherein they're doing insurance by mileage based on a sensor that is attached to a car. So again, multiple examples of this. The third category, and this is very, very important, wherein software is actually transforming core industries. So if you look at autonomous and connected cars, really what's happening is, it's literally software and AI that is, making this happen. You're now able to, in theory, some of these could also bring in huge changes in business models. For example, today, in near future, Tesla is supposed to get fully autonomous. And in theory, you could go to your office in your car, and then you could let the car run on its own as a fleet. So you're improving asset usage and things like that. So there's significant changes here. Industrial IoT, where machines are connecting to each other, and bringing in significant capability to optimize, because there's predictive maintenance, predictive capabilities that using that data. Connected homes, more around convenience and energy efficiency. And last but not the least, and very, very important, is genomic research or AI in medicine, which will truly bring in personalized medicine, wherein in theory you'll be able to create the right medicine for that specific person and that specific problem. So there's a lot of things that are happening today in these areas, right? Last but not least, I don't know if I should call this digital transformation, but definitely a lot of fundamental research in core industries, including renewable energy, faster transportation like Hyperloop, efficient space travel like SpaceX, and all of that. So I think, needless to say, if just to summarize, right, when we look at if you talk about what's happening today as the fourth industrial revolution or digital transformation, the first one was the first industrial revolution was definitely useful, but not impactful on people's life. The second one brought in a lot of inventions that could only be done once and made significant impact to human lives. The third one was a little bit more unidirectional, and the fourth one definitely seems to have all the right elements to impact human lives, and huge amount of opportunities, huge amount of problems to solve. And I think we are in a very exciting time frame, as I told before. As an entrepreneur, there's a good amount of ecosystem, there is a good amount of support. So I really wish all of you the very best in your entrepreneurial endeavors. With that, I'll open up for questions.
Hi, Rajesh, this is Prasanna Nair here, fellow digital strategy enthusiast. Quick question for you. What do you see as the most significant shift post-COVID, right, in the way folks approach digital transformation? The most significant shift?
So, sure. I think, see, at least so far as we are seeing, I would say the most significant shift today is really the first step, which is sort of the digitalizing part itself. In the sense that, you know, the way we look at it is an organization can be first digital and then sort of cognitive. In the sense, you know, digital is just being able to connect without, you know, through a direct channel to your consumers. So that part we think has been happening in a significant way. In fact, probably last 9 months, we see a lot of acceleration happening in that part, and that would mean, you know, enterprises are moving to cloud. They're trying to use these channels where they can reach out directly to their consumers. If it is a bank, for example, how do you do account opening in a much better, you know, direct way? Or if you're an insurer, how do you get a policy, you know, how can you sign up for a policy in a direct way? I think that is the element that we see as being you know, we see as being accelerated during this time. Of course, you know, apart from all the advances that are happening in healthcare and the vaccines and all of that, purely from a digital standpoint, I would say today a lot of industries or customers got it became an imperative for them to implement and bring in even the first step of digital strategy and sort of accelerate that, if that makes sense.
Okay, so acceleration is the word.
Absolutely. There's definitely a very, very visible acceleration because, and we're seeing that even in some of the very, very traditional players, you know, like insurance is as traditional as it gets normally. And we're seeing, not that they've not been thinking about it, but definitely they're looking at how do we accelerate this? How do we do this much faster? Because now it is starting to look like an imperative. Not starting to. I mean, it's definitely imperative for anybody to do this. And you know, very interestingly, one of the large insurers that we work with within India, and this is HDFC Life, and they have been growing at it. They have actually invested in a lot of digital strategies from early on, and I would say fairly you know, early level digital strategies in terms of probably not so much of cognitive technologies or so much of AI. But you know, for example, they digitized a lot of their partner interactions. So they get a lot of policies coming in through partners, and typically, you know, that's a lot of paperwork that happens. So they you know, these guys actually optimized a lot of that early on, and they've been accelerating that now. But the thing that we found, for example, was they were able to do business much efficiently compared to others, even pre-COVID. But then during COVID, we saw that part was accelerating because you know, even the adoption of those platforms were accelerating for sure.
All right, thank you.
So Rajesh, can I ask, how does ethics and AI, where do they meet, and what are the issues that you're going to find? With these powerful tools, we are going after solving problems and also doing things. And how does ethics play in this role? Play a role in this transformation?
I think that's an excellent question. I don't know if anybody has answered it in the sense that I think what I meant was that as AI gets prevalent, definitely one of the big problems that will come up is about, you know, who decides what is right, right? And you know, my sense is a lot of that will have to be addressed by regulation ultimately, and there'll have to be rules laid down for that, and that's probably also the reason why a lot of industries are still not yet there in terms of adopting AI, because the regulation becomes important. And for example, if you have a self-driving car, and if it gets into a tricky situation, you know, who is more important, right? I mean, if you have a pedestrian on one side and if you have something else on the other, who's more important? I think those questions, I mean, at a very basic level. Of course, there on the larger level, there is a question of if all the work gets automated, which is very unlikely. I mean, which is probably far-fetched. But then, how do people earn income? And then you get into the discussions around universal income and what's right. So I think that's a very important consideration, is how I would say that for sure.
Arvind, I have a question, Mr. Rajesh. This is Dinesh.
Yeah, please. Dinesh.
So I'm a faculty here in IIT Palakkad. Now, especially the COVID situation has led to several loss in jobs. Right? I mean, several people have lost their career and they have lost their business, everything. Now, how do you see this as a resource in the coming days? Or is it going to be a liability, a big liability? So how is it going to affect, or digitization is going to affect this, or how this is going to help? What will be the all of these things?
So I think at a very broad level, I mean, not just looking at, I would probably think COVID is a very specific situation in the sense that, because there's a massive shutdown on all economic activity.
Correct,
So it's
correct.
almost like we had to use digitization to get something done. So to that extent, it is probably not contributing so much to the job losses. I would almost argue it's the other way around, in the sense that because digital is there, or because some of these channels are there, we are all still able to, or a large portion of us who are more fortunate are able to continue our work. But on the other side, there is this whole aspect around, for example, once you have self-driving cars, a lot of drivers around the world would lose their jobs. And so there is that aspect is definitely a very, very critical aspect. And the answer to that is retraining people and reskilling people for the new economy jobs. Though I think it's still not, personally, I think it's still not going to be that easy, in the sense that, when these shifts happen, there is always going to be a set of people who may not be able to catch up because they're trained in a certain thing and they've been doing it for some time, or just circumstances. So one of the sort of connected to the ethics question, I think this is again one of the big questions that will come up in terms of really at a larger level, in terms of what kind of policies would help mitigate some of these. Because I mean, if you look at any of these transformations, eventually you see that there is a productivity increase, and mostly you would see that while we worry about certain technologies, eventually it does bring productivity increase, and people adjust accordingly in terms of picking up those jobs that are important. So that should happen here as well, but there is definitely a question of time frame, and there is going to be people who will get impacted. So that I would say that's probably also a big open question at this point in time. Certainly something that will come in if there is mass adoption of automation. But at the same time, there is another way of looking at it, is that a lot of tasks that get automated are sort of more manual tasks, and in theory, we can reskill people to do the more creative tasks, which may not always happen in reality.
Yeah, so I mean, my take is that loss of jobs could be a significant challenge in digitization. That's what you say.
Loss of job could be a significant challenge in yes, I think when you go all the way to digitization, in terms of, when I say all the way to digitization, once you start automating processes fully, and once you have AI that actually does a lot of things, then yes, I think because the first step of digitization, and I'm talking about from an enterprise standpoint, the first set of digitization is to establish the basic channel connectivity, which in a lot of cases, that itself is not there in a lot of, for example, even today, a lot of enterprises like banks and insurers are struggling to just do the basics of digitization in terms of being able to connect directly with their customers, and that per se may not result in so many job losses, but once you get to the level of complete automation, it will result in job losses.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Rajesh, can I just say something?
Yes, sir.
See this, you mentioned in the last line that like most of the jobs will be lost would be manual jobs, right? Yeah, manual jobs would be what would be lost. that is actually true. In fact, we have seen this earlier also when computers came, right? In some sense, right?
Right.
And so the question is, so if you want to now fill up that gap, right? Because a lot of people who today don't have basic education would end up in that kind of jobs, right? Very, say people who have never gone to college would possibly end up in manual jobs. So now, if that sector is being going to be removed or mostly removed, okay, then it is also important that that level of education everybody is pushed through, right? That
Absolutely.
go into the basic level of job now requires
Absolutely.
education. So is there do you see this being in the policies of especially developing countries, and or is there an effort to kind of put this through? They're saying that the basic school education has to be at a certain level where they will be able to manage digital technologies without understanding anything, but at least manage that, right? So
Yeah, I, I think there are efforts, but I mean, I believe probably not at the pace at which it should happen. So I mean, I agree with you. I think the only solution for this problem is education and getting people updated on these technologies and be able to, really literate on these areas. It's probably not happening at the same level as it should, and that's also to an extent. I mean, I would argue that's also causing unrest in different areas, different geographies as well, right?
it's also a very difficult task because these
Absolutely,
technologies change also, right? And people
absolutely,
who
absolutely.
don't have a very high level of education cannot adapt very quickly. So you train them on something, and then if that technology disappears, and then they're not able to do something, pick up something.
Absolutely. I think the pace is extremely, I mean, especially the acceleration has just gone up significantly. So right. So, and probably I think this is I mean, not probably, I think this is a challenge all governments are grappling with, but unfortunately, innovation always moves faster than the government action, right? So it's a question of how do we then catch up and address some of these problems.
So,
But definitely, these are very, very important questions, and in some of the other cases, while technology might be around, regulation will also regulation and lobbying will also prevent prevent the technology from getting used to an extent, right? I mean, I think when you talk about medical diagnosis in a country like US, there's a question of who takes the liability. I mean, that becomes a big,
Correct.
those questions come up.
So this is Prasanna here. Just to add to the point you made about the government, if you notice the Singapore government, especially in the banking sector, they've laid a dictum out, right? Saying that we know that in the next 3 to 4 years, the front office jobs are going to disappear in the banks, but we will prevent all financial institutions from firing people that work in these front office jobs. So it becomes the bank's requirement to train these people and reposition them. So governments are coming in more strongly now than ever.
But,
Absolutely. I think there's definitely an understanding.
I also, my name is Shanti, I'm one of the attendees. I think that educating them to the level of creativity that's required is also going to be prohibitively expensive as we go forward. Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you, Shanti.
Yeah, so, I mean, somebody has to, where will the costs be incurred, It's easy to say, don't fire the people, but the bank has to sustain itself.
So,
Also, we are talking about, not just not firing, that is true, but also not employing, right? In the future, people may not get employed. I agree
True,
that
true.
when the transformation comes over, we may have to retrain and then use them for something. But the question is whether you take what next round of selection, we don't take those people, right?
so there needs to be a total reimagination of what we call education and training.
Yeah, no, that's what
Absolutely, and there will definitely have to be a big social readjustment or adjustment in some sense, because ultimately, I mean, if you assume free market will eventually win, but then there is definitely going to be a lot of inefficiencies and casualties along the process. So I think that is going to be a tough problem for sure.
Also, the pace at which innovation takes place, the training has not kept pace
Will not
at
be
the same
absolutely,
speed. So
absolutely,
therefore,
absolutely.
it's always going to be a catch-up situation.
And if just to kind of on the government mandate kind of issues, what the other problem that would happen also is there'd be a digital bank that would come up and disrupt the existing player without, yeah, like you said, the new hiring will not happen because somebody would come up with a digital bank and say, okay, we are absolutely new, so we don't have any more. So these are all
That's what Paytm or any of these apps are doing, right? They're doing
absolutely.
away with the banking system for all
They're trying to, I think.
practical purposes. A lot of the volume gets. Yes, Saurabh.
And see,
Hello,
one last
sir.
point.
It's me, Saurabh Kumar Pandey from second year mechanical branch, IIT Palakkad. So my question is, sir, considering the growth of robotics and groups like Boston Dynamics, which makes amazing agile robots, but they find it difficult to sell their at last humanoid robot and robot dogs like Spot. So, sir, do you think that apart from manufacturing work, what you think about future businesses in humanoid robotics apart from manufacturing? Because there is a high scope in manufacturing, but apart from manufacturing. Thank you.
Sure. I don't, I mean, it's not so much of my expertise, but I can imagine some of these robots being used in like hazardous situations, right? For example, mining or areas which are hazardous, or potentially even once you have 5G and once you are able to once you're able to connect remotely in a very very fast way, there could even be in theory there could be robots used for customer service which is operated by somebody, I mean, which might not even be completely intelligent robot, but it's really more of robots that are operated by somebody who is operating it from elsewhere. So there's you know um, just some
Okay, thank
thoughts.
you, sir.
Pradeep Kumar. Pradeep Kumar, yes, please. Unmute yourself. Mr. Pradeep Kumar. You have a question, Mr. Pradeep Kumar?
I
Anybody
think he's
else?
having some audio.
Yeah. Anybody else with a question? So
Rajesh, can
how
I?
would you, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask, how do we use all these tools in countries like India, where to work with industries like farming, agriculture, or basic education, where and we have serious problems in all these spaces. How do we use these tools to improve or transform some of these industries? I think we may be able to leapfrog a whole lot because we have the problem for a long time. We have a new tool which could put us ahead if we rightly use that. So, any thoughts on that?
Sure. I mean, I think a few things that are. I mean, if you look at it, of course, in fact, I was reading something in Economic Times today around Khan Academy versus the some of the other online players for education, right? And the fact that Khan Academy is free, but then people don't want to use it. But I think but still the point is, I think there's one of the things that is there is I feel for a country like India, we with all of these, we still have a lot of resources available to for example, for online learning, for example, there's a lot more resources available today that in theory you could pick up pretty much anything. So there's a lot of those opportunities, of course, whether people have the uh, ability. I mean, I think both in terms of, the financial ability also matters, right? All of those things, that's a different question. But then the other aspect is, there are also a lot of improvements that are happening. Of course, financial sector is one where there are improvements happening, where micro credits and all of those, there could be a lot of opportunities to look at people's behavior and then provide credit in the right way. That could be a very easy example. But then agriculture is another area where a lot of technologies are coming up. In fact, one of the companies that we work with, what they do is they actually automate a lot of they automate a lot of quality check of strawberries and fruits like that, right? Using basically using computer vision and AI. And of course, in agriculture, for us, maybe the question or maybe the answer may not be automation, but it might be more of, can we create more predictable environments so that ultimately the crop output is more predictable. So I think there is a question of the technology, and then there is a question of how do we use the technology in a way which is valid for our context and for a country like India.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So I have a question, which is, how can we use digital transformation to speed up the process of academia learning, to bridge the academic industry divide, which is always being talked about?
One of the things I think that is to a large extent, we think there are platforms, or we're seeing platforms that are trying to bridge this, wherein, one of the key challenges in, at least so far as I'm concerned, and of course, this has got nothing to do with the institute. This has also got a lot to do with, like my own exposure as a student and what do I want to do and all of that, is that when we went to school, the connective industry was extremely or fairly less, I would say, and both at IIT and IIM, and there were options, and I think some, and I've seen, even if there are options, there is another question of whether as a person do I avail those. But today, what we're seeing is there's a lot more of opportunities to innovate, work with industries. That is one. But there are also startups trying to address this in terms of there are startups or who are trying to create course curriculum along with academia, but bringing in the industry aspect, right? So to an extent, I would argue that these are sort of digital transformation efforts in that direction, wherein you know you have certain courses wherein which is kind of co-created between academia and industry, and those would certainly improve in ensuring that students get to understand both sides and get a lot more well versed with industry. So it's happening to an extent. Um, and probably the technologies are also helping helping with the industry academia connect a lot more than um, uh, what was happening say 15-20 years back.
Thank you very much for the inputs. You're muted,
Thank you.
Arvind, you're muted.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Rajesh.
Thank you, Arvind.
Thank you. I think your talk was very interesting, and I especially was fascinated by your take on how there's a history to many of these things that have happened, and we ought to know more about our past, to paraphrase Theodore Roosevelt, so that we're better prepared for our future.
I was not sure if I would be able to cover it, so I thought kind of had to rush through it. But at least I thought, because as a student, I didn't think much about history. So now I'm starting to think a little bit more. So I thought I wanted to bring in that perspective. But thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Sunil sir.
Thank you very much. Yeah, for the students,
so I can drop off, right?
Yes, thank you. Students, 2 o'clock, we join on the other link.
Thank you.
Bye.